Today we are taking a look at Sony's newest Super 35 mirrorless camera, the A6700. This is the first APS-C camera that Sony have released into their Alpha series lineup for a while now, but of course we had the FX30 released last year, which this camera shares a lot with. So in this video we'll be taking a look at this new camera, how it performs, and comparing it to a few of Sony's other cameras. But before we get into the video, please subscribe to the channel, and if you want to buy anything you see in the video or any other filmmaking or photography gear, head over to cvp.com where our experienced team is waiting to help you. We only had the A6700 for a couple of days, so only managed to shoot a few clips with it over that time, but we did grab some studio work as well as some stuff out and about. The A6700 looks to use the same APS-C sensor as the FX30. This is a backside illuminated CMOS sensor with a physical size of 23.5 by 15.6mm and a resolution of 6192 by 4128 or 26 megapixels, which you can capture in its stills mode. It is a Exmor-R BSI CMOS sensor, which is combined with dual Bionz XR processing units and Sony's latest AI processing unit. With the sensor using roughly 6K when shooting in 16:9, you are oversampling this down to 4K. This takes 5976 by 3356 worth of pixels and uses them all without pixel binning or line skipping. This oversampling process will do several things to improve the image quality, such as help with noise floor, color depth, and increased detail. When it comes to photography, APS-C is often seen as a cheaper and not quite as professional option compared to full frame. And while of course full frame has its benefits for both filmmaking and photography, Super 35 has been the standard for filmmaking for years, and there is definitely still a place for it. Lens choice alone is a big reason to choose a sensor of this size. There are a massive range of native lenses that will work great with it, as well as a massive selection of lenses you can easily adapt thanks to the shallow flange depth of E-mount and various adapters available for it. There are also more affordable lens options that won't cover full frame but will cover this sensor. The Sigma 18-35 instantly pops into my mind as it's still one of the best bang for buck lenses that you can get. And of course you'll also be able to use a speed booster if you do want to get a bit closer to that full frame look. Rolling shutter performance of the A6700 is pretty much the same as the FX30. You can see clear warping when performing fast pans, but you'll be fine with most filming situations. If you do need something faster though, I would suggest looking at the Fujifilm X-H2S or the Sony A7S III. The camera also has up to 5 stops of in-body image stabilization, which works just as well as the other Sony bodies that have it built in. This will be handy as the camera is so light, which means it will be prone to micro jitters when filming, which this should help smooth out a little bit. For our Latitude tests, we grabbed the FX30 and the A7 IV to compare to the A6700, as well as a Metabones EF2E adapter and our trusty Otis 55mm, which we used across all 3 cameras. Here's a breakdown of our methodology that we used, but let's take a look at the results. When it comes to overexposure, they all look pretty similar, with maybe a slight edge for the A7 IV. There is however a more visible difference between the 3 in the undertests. The A7 IV is the clear winner with less overall noise and better colour performance. You can also see more CMOS smearing with the FX30 and the A6700 than you can with the A7 IV. The FX30 and the A6700 perform almost identically, which isn't too surprising given their similar sensor specs, and the A7 IV's larger sensor definitely helps its performance here versus the other 2 cameras. While the A6700 isn't marked as having a dual base ISO sensor, it looks to behave the same as the FX30 does. This means that in S-Log3 the low base is 800, and you can then see a clear step of noise reduction at 2500. This will change though depending on what gamma you are in. Here's a quick list of the differences across the gammas. As with the FX30, this camera can get a bit noisy, so I would definitely suggest experimenting with different ISOs, exposures, and noise reduction settings to try and get the best results that you can. When it comes to recording formats, the camera is very similar to what is featured in the FX30 but with a couple of changes. You still have the ability to record in a range of different UHD and HD XAVC combinations. This is a great range of options, including 3 flavours of XAVC 4K, so you can easily choose exactly what you want depending on what you need. I personally like to keep the camera in the Intra flavour of XAVCS when I know I have enough media to deal with the increased data rates, but the H.265 version is also a really good option. All of this is available in a mix of 4210-bit or 4208-bit, depending on what you want to choose. The A6700 can record 4K 120, which isn't Intra, and 60 in 4K and Full HD 240 in XAVC-I. These are some pretty solid frame rates to have available, and while it's not Intra at 4K 120, which is possible with the FX30, the footage still looks good. When shooting in 4K up to 60 FPS, it crops in slightly to 1.04 times of the sensor. As you go above that, it crops in by 1.6 times, and in Full HD above 200, it crops in by 1.5 times. These are similar crops to the FX30, and it is quite substantial, especially when compared to full frame field of views, but it's definitely not unusable by any means. It's just not going to be the cleanest high frame rate footage when compared to the likes of the A7S III and FX3. One of the things that I was a bit worried about when Sony told us the recording capabilities of the A6700 was how fast it was going to overheat, as it doesn't have as robust a recording solution compared to the FX30. Well, during our testing, we managed to record about an hour and a half's worth of 4K XAVC-I at 25p with auto power off temp set to high before the camera overheated and turned off. We had to change the battery in the card a couple of times when running this test, which I think is quite telling. I was actually quite impressed with how long we managed to get out of this camera given the size of it, and Sony's previous history of overheating cameras. And it didn't take too long for the camera to become usable again. Obviously, your mileage may vary, and if you plan on doing mission critical work and want to be more reassured your camera isn't going to overheat, I would seriously look at Sony's more specific video focus cameras like the FX30. You have the option to shoot all of the regular log and colour profiles that you would expect from a Sony camera. This includes S-Log3 S-Gamma3.Cine, which will be what you want to shoot if you want to get the most out of your footage and then take it into post and get the exact look that you want. It also means that you can get used to shooting and processing in this gamut and gamma, which is great as the entire Sony Cinema line can do this. This means that you can easily progress onto another camera in the line and apply the same knowledge into shooting with that system. It also has S-Cinetone built in, which can result in some nice imagery. But you can also load in your own LUTs, which you can bake into your recorded image or just use as a monitor LUT. There is no Cine-I mode in this camera, just a log mode, which uses the flexible ISO mode from other Sony cameras, which makes sense as it's not a video focus camera. This means exposing the camera is pretty simple. You have a range of exposure tools as well, but the zebra function really is excellent in these cameras. It's great for exposing your footage quickly. You can dial in a zebra for mid-grey when shooting S-Log3, which is 41%, and a secondary percentage for your given skin tone exposure or clip point, and you're good to go. The autofocus in modern Sony cameras is excellent, and the A6700 features the same up-to-date version as these newer systems do. This includes using Sony's latest AI processing unit, which means it has the same updated AI processing that was debuted in the A7R5, which not only improves the speed and reliability of focusing, but it also adds better subject detection for not only humans, but also airplanes, cars, animals, birds, and insects. These are all available in both stills and video mode. This new AI processing unit works in the background and allows the camera to recognize humans when they are smaller in the frame by recognizing what limbs are what. It also now has 759 autofocus points that cover 97% of the height of the frame and 93% of the width. There is also a new auto framing mode, which uses the new AI processor and the camera's subject detection to crop and reframe in camera, which could be useful for some creators. Eye autofocus is also now possible when using clear image zoom. With the A6700 being a hybrid camera, it's not surprising that it's a great stills camera with some really good specs. Unlike the FX30, it features a mechanical shutter and much better burst modes. It can shoot at 11 frames per second with continuous autofocus in both mechanical and electronic shutter modes. It has a buffer of over 1,000 fine JPEGs, 59 RAWs, and 44 RAW and JPEGs. There is also a flicker-free shooting variable shutter mode, which is available in both stills and video, which will be handy for preventing pesky shutter artifacts. The body design of the A6700 is very similar to the previous APS-C Alpha series cameras, but with several key great improvements. The grip is a touch bulkier, with a more substantial feel to it, and there are now dials for controlling all key exposure points without needing to hit a secondary key, which is a massive improvement. But the body is still incredibly tiny, and will make for an excellent travel or under the radar camera, especially with a nice compact APS-C prime. It's around the same size as the original Pocket Cinema camera. There is also a new mode dial, which is really nice for going between stills, video, and slow and quick modes. The viewfinder on it is great as well. It uses an XGA OLED panel and has a 1.07 magnification. It's decently sized and bright, and honestly, one of the big reasons to choose this camera over the likes of the FX30. It also has a 3-inch flippy monitor and a micro HDMI if you want to connect an external monitor to it, but no external RAW here unfortunately. It also only has a single UHS 2 capable SD card slot, which isn't too surprising given its tiny size. It just lacks the dual recording functions of other Alpha series cameras. It does however use the MPF Z100 batteries, which is the same as a large range of Sony's other modern mirrorless cameras, and provides decent runtimes with it. As it's a new camera, it is also running a very up-to-date version of Sony's menu system, which means you have the new touch interface and all the other new bells and whistles that you would expect, such as focus breathing compensation, rate monitoring tools, but still no shutter angle. Come on Sony. There are so many cameras in Sony's lineup now, it's honestly hard to keep track sometimes. But at roughly £1,450, the A6700 is actually relatively affordable considering what it can do. The camera shares so much with the FX30, including image quality for the most part, which does make it look very attractive. They are quite close in price, so you may be looking at both of them if you are primarily shooting video. However, there are some clear differences between them in this regard, which we have mentioned in this video. Whether the FX30 is worth the extra £300 over the A6700 for you will come down to what kind of work you do. But for people wanting peace of mind when recording over longer work days, and you don't want the camera to overheat really, the FX30 will be worth the extra money. However, the biggest difference between them is their stills capabilities. The FX30 is realistically not a hybrid camera, whereas the A6700 is. It's a much better stills camera, but the FX30 is a better filmmaking camera. The viewfinder is also another huge plus for so many hybrid shooters, and at its price, it is an excellent hybrid option if you can't stretch to the A7 IV, which is a good chunk more expensive. There are plenty of options at its price, so let us know if you want to see a comparison video of cameras at this price in the comments below. But if you're looking for a primary filmmaking camera, this camera may not be the best choice for you, and I would strongly advise looking at the FX30. With this camera, Sony have also released a new 7200 f4G and a very interesting looking mic. The new 7200 f4G OSS2 is a really nice compact option for people not needing an f2.8 zoom, and it has some pretty cool features. It can produce excellent images, which isn't too surprising, but the most surprising feature is its new half macro function. This half macro capability works across the entire zoom range, with a minimum focus distance of 26cm at the wide end, which ramps to 42cm at the tele end, which is excellent for a tele lens, and you can get some really good looking macro shots with it. It's much smaller than the previous f4 lens, but it does now extend, which is good for storage but not quite as practical when on camera. It also features an updated focus mechanism, so it's lightning fast to focus and easy to manual focus for video. The microphone that they've released also looks really awesome. It's an on-camera mic that connects and powers directly through Sony's Mi shoe, which is on plenty of their cameras. It has the ability to switch between 8 different pickup patterns via the back dial. This means that you can easily switch what pattern you want to use on the fly depending on what situation you're in. One really interesting feature that it has though is the ability to record 4 channels of audio, with the first 2 being the primary source of whatever pattern you select, and then channels 3 and 4 being your safety channels, both recording an omnidirectional pickup pattern, with channel 3 recording it at your given gain setting and channel 4 at -20 dB. This is an awesome feature and could be incredibly useful for anyone running and gunning with an on-camera microphone who wants to have that extra peace of mind. We want to take a look at this some more, so let us know if you want to see a video on it down in the comments below. We've covered a lot of Sony's current ecosystem of cameras in some of our previous videos, so if you want to learn more about any of their cameras, including the FX30, FX3 and FX6, I've made a little playlist with everything we've made related to Sony in the description below. Anyway, let us know what you think of this Sony A6700 and if you have any further questions down in the comments below. And if you like the video, please give it a like and maybe consider subscribing so you don't miss out on our awesome upcoming content. Thank you so much for watching.